And I'm going to share my screen for Barb, and Barb is going to take it away for us.
Thanks, Jillian. Appreciate it. This is really exciting to be here tonight. I'm going to start by introducing Inclusion Nova Scotia. For those of you who might not know who we are a provincial nonprofit organization who are dedicated to empowering individuals with intellectual disabilities and their families, enabling them to live fully inclusive lives in community. Next. We are a national grassroots family-based association and we've been around since 1954. This was a grassroots family. It was parents who started this association. We're part of a Federation of Inclusion Canada and International. We are anchored in the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and our vision and mission is grounded in human rights. Next. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Family Committee. I'm volunteering once again with Inclusion Nova Scotia and currently chairing the Family Committee. And so I thought it would be important for me to talk a little bit about my journey with this organization. And it began probably over 30 years ago when it was then called NSACL, so the Nova Scotia Association for Community Living. When my daughter, Mallory, was probably about 5 or 6 years old. We were new to the province. We didn't know anyone. We had no family here. And we were struggling as a family, feeling very isolated and alone. And I was hungry as her mom for information to learn how I could best support her and our family unit. And I came across this organization, and they brought me in and gave me opportunities to learn as a parent. I was part of a family committee way back then. I grew and learned with these other parents through attending meetings and workshops and information sessions, and just connecting with them, with parents who were always there to support me. And connecting with other families always gave me strength and courage and allowed me to be the advocate that I became for my daughter, Mallory. So important that you are with a group of people who share the same values and beliefs that you do, that you want for your child. And it meant the world to me at the time. And besides my own children, it has always been other parents who have been my greatest teachers, those who walked the path before me with their wisdom, support, and guidance, always lending a hand when needed. Next, please. So the family committee really is pretty simple as far as I see it. You know, it's parents supporting parents, families supporting families. It's about our family units, all of our kids and how they are supported. It's meeting others who get it. We get it when we meet with other families. There's a shared understanding of the day-to-day challenges, and there is no judgment. We understand what it's like. We have knowledge and experiences that we can share with others. We can provide guidance and support to younger families coming up, and we can build community together. Next. So some of the lessons that I've learned along the way, we are stronger together when we can come together as a collective community. We have power in doing that. And as cliche as it is, knowledge is power. I truly believe that, because every time I learned something new, every bit of knowledge that I gained, Mallory benefited, and so did my entire family. Family networks exude strength, and that scares government. And we have an ability right now, because of the remedy, to influence change in Nova Scotia like never before. But we have to be ready. We as a community have to prepare for the remedy. And we know our kids best. We've built community for our kids. We know how to do this. We need to show government what we know, what we've learned in all of the roles that we've had as parents over the years. And simply, there is nothing like a community of support that truly feels like home, like you belong. Next. And simply the family committee goals is leadership to Inclusion Nova Scotia to ensure that the family voice remains strong, providing mentorship, supporting each other, learning from those who walk the path before us, welcoming new parents, and providing education, opportunities to learn with and from each other. Ongoing with opportunities like this, and hopefully in the future we'll be doing some in-person information sessions and workshops. Next. And so the remedy, what is it? We've heard so much talk about this. So I'm going to give you a brief history and then we're going to let Michael take over. But I think it's just important. We have to understand our history, where we've come from to understand where we're going. And so in Nova Scotia, there has been no development in this province for 30 years. It was in the mid-1990s when every bit of movement in regards to community development stopped. In the 30 years, there have been numerous reports, studies, research that has been done. Two significant reports was the Kendrick Report, published in 2001, and the roadmap in 2013. When Michael Kendrick was commissioned by the Department of Community Services to come in and review and provide feedback and a report on the community-based system in Nova Scotia, Michael did something that had never been done before. He brought people together, not just families, not just individuals, but service providers, day program providers, education individuals, nonprofit organizations. He kept bringing us all together and made us excited about what could be, dreaming about what the future could look like. Michael Kendrick's report basically did not go anywhere. That angered the community, and the Kendrick Report Coalition was formed because of that. And we were very active over a number of years. And then when the roadmap came out, it too sat on the shelf. Somewhere in between the Kendrick Report and the roadmap, the Kendrick Report Coalition changed our name to the Disability Rights Coalition to focus more on human rights. And then we were invited, the Disability Rights Coalition, to launch a human rights complaint in 2014 against the government of Nova Scotia on systemic discrimination against persons with disabilities. This human rights case lasted 8 years. It had numerous experts, witnesses, parents, family members, siblings, individuals who experienced institutional abuse and neglect. It was long. It was very emotionally difficult for those of us who were front and center over those 8 years. But we won. In 2021, the Nova Scotia Court of Appeal found our government guilty of systemic discrimination. There was a violation of human rights, and we were ordered, the DRC and government, to work together to come up with a human rights remedy. So that's where we're getting the remedy from. And basically, it means that the current system is broken, and it's been broken for 30 years and has not been meeting needs. And we have to create a new way to provide community-based supports based on and respects human rights. So again, experts were brought in who are in the field of inclusion. Dr. Tim Staton from BC, Eddie Bartnick from Australia, and they spent a good year and a bit doing very similar things, consulting with community, holding meetings, talking to family members. And they wrote a report that aligned with the Kendrick Report, the roadmap, the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and all of the successful options that are happening around the world. The remedy is a report with a 5-year plan. It has 6 key directions, which I'm going to share with you. I'm not going to elaborate, but just give you a sense of what that means. It means individual planning and support coordination, closing institutions, community-based supports and services, regional hubs, so developing more support in local communities, individualized funding, and disability systems capacity building. So when you think about that, we see that it is steeped in human rights, it is supportive, it is respectful, inclusive, and empowering, versus historically in Nova Scotia, what all parents have heard over the years when our kids get into high school is to get on a list. And what is the list for? Could it be residential services? Could it be day programming? And where might I be on the list? We never know where that list might lead us. And if your name ever does come to the top of that list, the language that our government has used is, a bed is now available for your son or daughter. This approach has always been disrespectful, dismal, with very little hope for families. So when we're looking at the 2 options of approaches, I think that the remedy is going to offer us a lot of hope for the future. It will be a complete cultural shift in how families and individuals with intellectual disabilities will be supported in Nova Scotia. It is precedent setting. We are being watched internationally, but we can't be complacent. We, as a community, have to prepare and ready ourselves. We need to understand what we want for our kids' futures. We have to have faith, open minds to learn about what's possible, to come together, work together, and have confidence to present our own ideas and plans to government. No longer do we want government to dictate to us what they think we need. We need to start telling them what we need for our children. And just because it hasn't existed before doesn't mean we can't ask for it. This is what it's about now. It is monumental. It's going to have a lot of opportunity. And boy, what an incredible gift that we could give to our children in this process. So I will leave you with a quote from Margaret Mead. It's, as many of us have heard in the past, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Thank you.
Thank you, Barb. So we're going to hand it over to Michael Kendrick. And just a quick little kind of information about Michael, who we're going to hear from. Michael Kendrick is we didn't check that sentence, sorry guys, is renowned for his work in human services and community work. He has a passion for providing quality services to people with disabilities, and as mentioned by Barb, in 2001 was contracted by the Nova Scotia government to write the Kendrick Report, a review of community-based options in the province. So Michael has a lot of experience in this area, and he's going to tell us a lot more about all the things we're wondering about. So take it away, Michael.
Well, thank you everyone for giving up your dinner to be on this session. It may not feel like it, but the lives of people with disabilities are immensely better than they had been even half a century ago. While we're very conscious of what isn't going well, it's important to remember that there are many different ways in which the lives of people with disabilities are better today than they were before. In fact, a lot of that can be traced really to the quality of advocacy. As long as someone is able to stick up for you, you're going to have a better life. And with people with disabilities, it's very important that they have advocates in their life that keep pushing for whatever is needed. And the Nova Scotia Association for Community Living would be one example of an advocacy organization that has not given up over many years. And there was some allusions in the commentary there that, you know, we've been struggling in Nova Scotia to make breakthroughs. And that's a very fair comment. That Nova Scotia has not been at the cutting edge, particularly. And the advantage of that is that lots of other people have been pioneering better ways to treat people with disabilities in all kinds of places around the world. And so now we can literally just go and steal every good idea that somebody else has come up with. So the ideas are out there, the evidence is out there in all kinds of ways. I could go on for hours about how many things are improved. So for Nova Scotia, the challenge is really adopting many of the innovations that already have existed here and there around the world. So we have to look outward to borrow these things. Now, it's not that there aren't positive things developed in Nova Scotia, but certainly most families would like to know what would be best for their daughter, their son. And the needs of people with disabilities are quite diverse. It's not like all people with disabilities need the same things. It's like the rest of us, we have needs that are unique to us. But the good news is that pretty much anything you could ask about, there are good examples of how people have done well with it. And I think the challenge is really an educational challenge of conveying what's been accomplished so that families can ask for that and advocate for it. Now, it has taken us a long time to get there, though. That even the progress we've made in many countries goes back well over half a century. So it wasn't like we did this overnight. But we, for instance, Nova Scotia would be one of the few jurisdictions left where people are still in institutions, many institutions as well as other institutions. But it's good to know that there are places in the world where there are no such things as either institutions or mini institutions any longer. If they do exist, they're relatively speaking for a very small number of people that just haven't had their opportunity yet. So the advantage of knowing that is that we can ask the Nova Scotia government and we can ask service providers to answer the question, if this is being done somewhere else, why aren't we doing it here? Why is my son or daughter not been able to get access to things that have been proven to be useful in other places? So that's the sort of situation we find ourselves in Nova Scotia. And I just want to pull rank a little bit by saying that, because I was born in Nova Scotia. My family's all from Nova Scotia. I did several university degrees in Nova Scotia. I have a home in Nova Scotia. I speak fluent Nova Scotian, whatever that is. So I don't want to come across as somebody from somewhere else that doesn't know anything about Nova Scotia. I've actually worked for the Nova Scotia government in the disability area 2 or 3 different times over the last half century. So I have a very strong interest, as you do, in what is possible. And one of the key things that we need to do in Nova Scotia is to start creating examples of better options. And this isn't really a question of money, it's a question of vision and ideas. And so to get some of those options out there and available to larger numbers of people, we have to know what we're asking for, what we're advocating for, and what it looks like. And so the implication, what I've just said, is that we have a bit of a learning curve ahead of us where we have to get familiar with options that we're not familiar with at the moment. It's very hard to be a family member and advocate for something you're unfamiliar with. And so I think the investment in families as advocates to learn more about what the options are or could be is going to be a big challenge. And it's not just for this generation of families. The brothers and sisters of people with disabilities can also be advocates when the parents are no longer here. So this involves not only parents, but family members, and then friends of families that step in and help out with the advocacy and the options for the person with a disability. So that's sort of the question of who's going to bring about these kind of changes. Well, you can't wait for the government to do that. Unless you really like waiting, it's not a very effective strategy. You really have to push and push and push governments because otherwise they'll do what is convenient or expedient for governments. So the key role of families as advocates is very important. And to be an advocate means you have to propose something. Some people think that all advocates do is criticize. And that would be true, that you have to criticize things. But many advocates, what they do is go beyond criticism to actually making proposals as to what would be a good replacement for what we have today. Now, if we don't know what those are, we can't propose them. So one of the things that the Nova Scotia Division and other allied groups of families can do is to create as many opportunities for families to learn about what are excellent options and how they work and how they benefit people and things like that. And so the beginning of being a good advocate is to educate yourself. And I think there are opportunities now to educate yourself because there's so many good examples that we can borrow from other jurisdictions, including some of the good stuff in Nova Scotia. Now, the biggest development really over the last generation has been to start seeing people with disabilities not as a member of a group of people with disabilities, but rather to see people with disabilities as unique people who happen to have a disability. And why is that distinction important? Well, if you don't treat people with disabilities as if they're a unique person, then you're going to treat them as if they're just like everybody else. In that sense, there's nothing unique about them. And so this idea is that we need more person-centered options for people, almost like one person at a time. Just like most of us don't just wear the same clothes, we all wear clothes that suit us. So it's very important to think about the person-centered options that aren't available at the moment in Nova Scotia, but have been pioneered to some extent in Nova Scotia as well. And that's a learning curve. You can't really wait for the government of Nova Scotia to do your thinking for you. Otherwise, you'll be wasting your time. You have to do the thinking yourself rather than waiting for government to come up with the solutions. And the Nova Scotia Division of Community Living can play an important role in that because it can help acquaint families with what is possible for their family member. Now, One of the things that has to change, though, is to stop treating people with disabilities as if they're the same as each other and putting them all in a same group. That each person with a disability is quite unique to themselves, and what they want to do with their life ought to be unique to them, or at least consistent with who they are. And what that means is that we really need to have more person-centered options in work, home, leisure, relationships, in different parts of life. So what I mean by person-centered is that we start with who the person is and create the things that would be ideal for that person. If we give everybody the same thing, that's called a standardized solution. Everybody gets the same size shoe. And in life, we don't need the same size shoe. We need the shoe that fits us. Or to put it in a different way, each person with a disability is a unique person, and you can create for that person what would be perfect for that person, but might not be good for another person with a disability. So when those options become more and more available, what you could say is that people with disabilities start getting the life that fits them best, rather than the life where they're treated the same as everybody else with a disability and everybody gets the same thing. And that's what's called standardized models of support. And the real hope in the future has got to be individual by individual. And you might say, oh, well, he's just making all that up. He doesn't know about this. It's impossible to do that. Well, you're a bit incorrect. I do know what I'm talking about. I've evaluated more services in more countries than anybody you're going to meet for quite a long time. And what I do know for sure is that you can treat a person with a disability as a unique person, not as a person with a disability, but a unique person that happens to also live with a disability. And when you do that, you're really focusing on the person and what they need. You're not thinking about them as a category, oh, they're disabled, because what they are is a person first who happens to live with some kind of disability or possibly several disabilities. And so they need support with two things. One is support with having a good life for themselves. In other words, the same question we all ask ourselves, what would be the best life for us? And then secondarily, where does the supports for the person's disability fit into that? How do you support people so that their disability isn't a reason not to have a good life? And to do that, you really need a way of operating that's different from what the majority of service providers in Nova Scotia at the moment offer, what are called group programs using standardized models. What that language just means is that people are grouped together and given pretty much the same thing. And sometimes, you know, they do something special for each one and so on. But on the whole, if you went into one day program in Nova Scotia and went into another, you'd see a striking similarity for them. Or if one group home to another group home, you'd see the relatively same kinds of patterns. But if you go to person-centered options, people may not even be in groups. They could have their own home, their own job, their own leisure and recreation, their own relationships. In other words, it isn't that they have to be around people with disabilities all the time. They can simply be with people that they feel comfortable with. And that concept is called social inclusion. And it means that you're connected to other people in your community. So all of those things, fortunately, are doable. We now know how to do them. Not everybody knows how to do them, but a good number of people now today know how to do exactly what I've been talking about. Now, if you feel like, well, I don't really know enough about this, that's no problem, because you can learn pretty much anything that is teachable. In other words, if you're not sure about lots of things that would be good for your family member, that can be changed. And, there's some kind of echo here. Could be the RCMP, I don't know. But, oh, they've gone away, that's good. So where we are in Nova Scotia then at the moment is that we are now at a point where the government finally has decided to do a bit more innovation. And so I think the timing's very good for the advocates, the families and advocates, to begin to form their own ideas about what the solutions would look like in their community for their family member. And that takes a while to figure those kinds of things out. But over the next decade, I think we could make enormous progress based on what's been done in other places. The good news is in Nova Scotia, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We could steal wheels from other people that did all that hard work of figuring out what would be a better wheel. I don't know if that's the right metaphor, but it's all I got today. But we can borrow and import all kinds of things. We don't have to invent things. Many of the things we will need or persons with disabilities will need already exist somewhere. And it'd just be a matter of making them get implemented here in Nova Scotia. Now, there'd be a couple of key things that I think will be important. The first is what would be called person-centered supports and lifestyles. In other words, that we don't plan for groups of people with disabilities, we plan for each person uniquely and implement the solutions uniquely. For instance, not all people with disabilities want to live with other people with disabilities. So why not have people with disabilities live with whoever they want to live with, including people that aren't disabled? It's not illegal in Nova Scotia for a disabled person to live with a person they like who is not disabled. In other words, there's no barrier except in our mind that we don't think of that option. But we can create those options. So in other words, you could have people with disabilities working alongside people in businesses. You could have people with disabilities having their own business. You could have people with disabilities joining whatever group in the community they want to join. All of that is quite possible and would be all doable because it's exactly what everybody else does to find the things that they need that would make for a rich life. Now, the question is, people say, oh, well, we would have good services if we had more money. Have you ever heard that before? Well, let me tell you a little story. Newfoundland is poorer than Nova Scotia economically. They've had better options in Newfoundland for individuals going back 20 or 30 years. So it's not money that makes the world go around, it's good ideas. And I don't mean to just compliment Newfoundlanders as the only people with good ideas. Lots of Nova Scotians have good ideas, but just to point out that when you have the good ideas, you're halfway to getting them implemented. So having the picture in your mind of what better looks like is the key really to implementing it. Many families would say, and it's a fair comment, they would say, I don't know what's better. It's not that I wouldn't like better, I just don't know what it looks like, or I don't know how to create it. And that's a legitimate response on the part of families. But I'll say something about that too. When families are properly educated about what's possible, they have no trouble advocating for it. Once they understand what better is, what it looks like, how you create it, and whatnot, then it's not so hard to, be a voice for it. Where many families get stuck, like most other human beings, is they can't picture solutions. You know, they get stuck at some point. They're not sure what the solution is. But all I can say really in regards to that is the solutions have already been pioneered somewhere. And it's quite possible simply to borrow heavily from localities, people, other families, groups, advocates that have been part of creating something that's better. And I'll just give you an example of a group that I worked with great interest. And I should say, by the way, that I used to be the #2 person in the Massachusetts government in the disability field. So I've also done this in
No,
government.
they got a air conditioner in the house.
Sorry,
Sorry, Michael, can we just ask everyone to please turn your microphones off? Thank you.
I have no objection to the RCMP listening in. Okay, I think we'll just proceed then. What I've been saying is that most anything families need to support their son or daughter already exists. In other words, you don't have to invent the wheel. You just got to find out where the wheel is. Who's got the wheel? You don't have to be an inventor of it. Some families are, and they're very creative in doing it. But most families will borrow good examples from other families or from what they've been told about or what they've come across. So families don't have to pioneer everything. They could simply borrow good ideas that have already proven themselves somewhere or another. But families do need help finding out where those good examples are, how they work, would they benefit your family member? There's a lot of questions that families understandably have about what would be better. So what is it why am I raising that? I think we need a very strenuous effort over the next 5 or 10 years in Nova Scotia to reach out to families, to have discussions about what is better and how does better work? How do you create it? How do you get government to fund it? There's many questions, but if families stay with it, it's important to remember that we can create anything anybody's created somewhere else. You don't really have to worry about that. What you have to worry about is just how long will it take, you know, because you can't wait forever. Obviously some things have to be more urgent than others. For instance, some of you are probably getting to be quite elderly, a bit like myself, and you're worried about, well, who's going to do this when I'm not here? And that's an excellent question. Parents ask themselves all the time. And the best thing you can do is to find some younger people that will step in for you. It can be brothers and sisters, it can be others. But that would be one thing that you can do, is to have some other people take over as much as possible some of the things that you have advocated for and so on. Equally though, it's quite possible in Nova Scotia each year to create more examples of what is positive and helpful for people with disabilities. And by that, I mean, expand the number of people that are in an individualized arrangement that works really well for them. Why am I saying that? Well, because you really create good things one person at a time. And if the government says it wants a remedy, and I think they're sincere, I do, I think then the solution has to be that we can't endlessly do group solutions for individuals. What we need are more individual by individual solutions for persons with disabilities. And just to use a metaphor, you can't give people with disabilities the same size of clothing. If you do that, some people are going to be in clothes that are too big for them, and others can't get into the clothes because the clothes are too small for them. And so what is needed? What is needed is the clothing that fits best. And hopefully it's attractive clothing. But what is that a metaphor for? It's a metaphor for individualized solutions that fit the person. And clothing is one thing. We're going to need clothing. But clothing is, if you use clothing as a metaphor for getting a life, then there are all kinds of clothing that a person might have in their life down the road. So it's creating those things. And people say, well, we only have so much money. Well, that's true. But it doesn't mean you can't create a lot of things with the money we do have. The issue is that we may not know what to create. And so I think there has to be some emphasis on educating ourselves about what is going to be more beneficial for a person with a disability. And this sort of person-centered solution is something that can be created one person at a time. Now, one of the things I used to do, I was the #2 person in the Massachusetts state government. And the groups I always were interested in were the people we did the worst with. In other words, we had them in services that weren't working for them. And I always liked the challenge of saying, well, this isn't working. Why don't we try something else? And, off we'd go and we'd pioneer something. And sometimes, we had to do that quite a few times, even with the same person, to get things right. But one of the things that was very true is that when you do that, you're more likely to get things right because you keep trying. Doesn't mean you have to be right when you start. You can learn as you go. So as long as people are committed to keep trying to get it right for an individual, most of the time people are going to be able to do that. I might just stop there because I've been running off, sort of the top of my head here, but I'd like to just open it up and see what people, what sort of things they're thinking of at the moment. One at a time, please.
Can I just speak then? It's Andrea. My daughter, she's making some steps towards, having a good life. I think, she's got hopefully a little job underway. The big things for us is, and she's quite capable, I think, of doing a lot with her life. But I don't even know if she knows what that looks like. So I have some ideas, but I don't want to say you're going to do that, right? I think she has to still figure some of that out for herself. And I think it's a maturity thing, maybe over the years she will do that. But, just as an example, it's a very general thing, housing, for example. I would love to know, and that would be an area of research for me, what are some really good examples of, options. I know here now they're changing zoning in Halifax, and you can, build up or build out or build on your property and all that sort of stuff. And, I think, I wonder if we could do something like that and renovate our existing house, but make an individual apartment or something like that, for her. And maybe she could have a roommate and she'd be close at hand, but, I'd like to know, like you say, examples. So that would be an example. Like when you think of something like that, Michael, okay, what would you say? Can you say, oh yes, this is a good example of that kind of setup, or, a place, or, somewhere that they've done this sort of thing for people? You know, because then I could see going to the government and saying, okay, I want money to renovate my house or whatever to, you know, accommodate her or whatever. So, you know, is this possible? Or I think you're saying it is.
Well, it's not illegal to have your family member live in their own unit in your house.
Yes, right, right.
So
Yeah.
you're not going to get arrested,
No, I know that.
even if you deserve it, Andrew. But
I don't think so.
no, but I think many families start where your thinking is, Andrea, is to say, well, why not have an apartment in our house and get some experience living sort of their own life and so on.
Yeah.
And that's perfectly fine. But you may be surprised that you could equally start where she lives halfway across town.
Right.
As long as she's got the right supports, she doesn't have to be in your home. Now, most of us can remember a time when living in our parents' home really didn't light our fire.
Well, for sure. And you know what? Honestly, we would rather that she wasn't here forever and ever, right? Because like you say, we're not getting any younger. So, but you know, example is housing prices are sky high and she will never have an income to support paying, you know, $3,000 a month for an apartment, you know, that would be decent, right? So
Yeah, no,
that is an issue, right?
well, you think of all the non-disabled people that are living with their parents because the rents are too high.
Right, right. Or they have like multiple roommates, or yeah, it's a problem for everybody right now, for sure.
Yeah, no, it's there's every living situation you can think of has problems. But it's important to keep looking at them. So, you know, your daughter is maybe just fine living in her own sort of unit in your home, have more independence and so on. But if that runs its life and, you know, you find yourself looking for another option, it's important to remember you can create those options.
Yeah.
You can help your daughter or son, as the case may be, to create something at another point in time.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing, though, that I think would be very helpful is to have more training workshops where families describe what they're doing to share with other families, because one of the things that is going on every day, and we don't notice it, is that a lot of families are pioneering all kinds of interesting things that they're helping their family member do, both in terms of work, where they live, their recreation, their holidays. So it's good to have an opportunity for families to hear about these things, because it's not illegal to steal good ideas that weren't yours to create.
Mm-hmm.
And most families aren't going to object to somebody borrowing their good idea.
Yeah.
But
It's finding those people, you know, like if you could find those people who, like you say, who have pioneered that. And, you know, maybe, I mean, I think of one of our board members that I think their son has, you know, really fit into the community, right? But, you know, I other than most of the people that I know with a child with a disability are kind of in our boat, you know. They're still trying to figure it out, right?
yeah, well, I wouldn't worry about that. I mean, we all start somewhere. And so just assuming we're sort of starting the next phase now,
Yeah.
it's still important to imagine better and to hear about ideas that are not familiar to you, but may be a very good fit for your family member.
Mm.
It's interesting. What most families try to do is they try to think, what can I do where I live? Like our home.
Yeah.
And that's an option for sure. But
Well,
they don't ask the question, if not our home, what else would work for my daughter or my son? And there would be examples of people that aren't living with their parents,
mm-hmm.
many examples.
Yeah.
And it would be good to kick the tires a bit of those examples to see if there's any of those examples that sort of feel like the right thing for your family member.
Yeah.
Because I know when people are growing up, they don't say to their parents, typically, oh, I want to do this or that, because often they themselves don't know what their options could be. So it's both the person with the disability and the family, both are on a journey to find the right answers.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that can speed that up is lots of training events for families to hear about stories about what other families and other people with disabilities have done with their life.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you have to come up with everything yourself.
Yeah.
And that you can only do that on Fridays after you've had too much to drink.
If you're lucky.
Yeah, because this is where it's very important to steal every good idea you can get your hands on.
Huh.
You don't even have to say thank you, because if it looks like a good idea and it walks like a good idea,
It
and
is.
it does what you want, then that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's what we need, Barb, is an ideas session with families, maybe. Yeah.
I
It's
think-
coming, Andrea. It's
Oh,
coming.
excellent. I love it. Yeah, that's a great idea.
No, it would be an ongoing thing too. It's not like one session. I think it would be good to
Yeah.
have an innovations evening, pretty much monthly, that's recorded,
Hmm.
on video or whatever.
Hmm.
And the families that couldn't make it or can always go back into the videos and catch up.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I
Yeah.
like the name too. Very catchy. Innovations Evening.
Yeah, no, it's what you need, because what families are looking for is inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And they're looking for something that would really fit better than what they've got right now.
Mm-hmm.
And people will tell you it's all about money, and it's not. It's all about ideas.
Hmm.
That with vision, you get somewhere. When you have no vision, all you got is a bunch of dumb ideas about how to spend the money.
Hmm.
So I think, this is something that the province of Nova Scotia should fund, which is family research, if you want to call it that, or
Hmm.
family exposure to all kinds of good examples that they can liberally steal from. The idea being that you don't have to come up with the ideas. You can simply borrow a good idea that you found through some example that somebody gave you.
Mm-hmm.
And those examples can be a game changer. I'll just give you an example.
Hmm.
Many families thought, well, they could, if the disabled person wasn't living with us, they'll go live with somebody else with a disability. Right? You've heard that. Well, most people with disabilities may not get up every morning and say, what I really want to do is live with someone who has an extra chromosome like I do. It's just not how people work.
Mm-hmm.
What they are looking for are people that they could be compatible with. And disability isn't the only thing that can bond people. So it's, in this sense, there could be people with disabilities living with all kinds of different people because it's a better match for them. And in somewhat quite different arrangements. For instance, I know people with disabilities that own their own home.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially share their home with another person or whatever.
Right.
Other people just share the rent with somebody else in another arrangement, So there are typically lots of different arrangements that we're not thinking about necessarily at the outset that sort of bubble up and you see, oh, well, that was a very good idea.
Hmm.
For instance, the families obviously include more than just parents. And siblings can play a key role, and both while the parents are still alive and when the parents have passed, in terms of their brothers and sisters. So in this sense, who's going to be imagining better isn't always necessarily going to be the parent. It can be the siblings, it can be friends of the family, it can be
Mhm.
people that you've heard talk about their story. And so it's quite possible for families to get a bunch of good ideas from a mix of sources.
Mhm.
And if there is an educational effort made, and then you have videos of the speaker and the example, and it may include, you know, families speaking or people with disabilities or government officials, then people can go to that resource and do their own research. In other words, if you've got 400, 500 videos on describing quite different situations that benefited people with disabilities, it's quite possible that some of those ideas will benefit another family. But that would require creating a sort of resource bank of videos that, you know, you could start out with, you know, in the first year and say we're going to do one of those a month. But once you get used to capturing good examples on video, then it comes a lot faster. You can do it a lot faster. And you can also use videos of other families somewhere else on the planet. You know, I've often connected families in Nova Scotia with people from all the countries I've been to. And some of those stories are already on video somewhere. So you could literally have a video bank in Nova Scotia of just interesting examples, not because you have to adopt them, but because you might want to adopt some of what they did. And you won't know what it is sometimes till you see it. You say to yourself, why didn't I think of that? And that's great. And people can change direction overnight because they have come across a new solution that never occurred to them that would be a good fit for their needs as a family and as an individual. So, you know, it'll take a while to build up that kind of story bank, might be, or example bank. But once you have it, then it's recorded somewhere.
So, but how do
And
we gain?
So Michael, can I ask a question? So thank you, Andrew. That was a great question. To me, and I appreciate that the remedy has now given Nova Scotians or Nova Scotian families an opportunity for better. But it would appear like the root cause, we had to actually go to a human rights complaint to get to the remedy. So it was not an obvious path forward for successive Nova Scotia governments. That would be my thoughts on that. My question to you, Michael, is we understand that the Department of Community Services is going to deinstitutionalize people first and then get to individualized funding. So based on your experience, like practically, like how other jurisdictions have implemented this, what has been the lag time from deinstitutionalization to the government actually getting to individualized funding and understanding the impacts and path forward with regards to the remedy in itself as a bureaucracy, as opposed to families being advocates? So that would be my question.
That's a good question. I think it's not the case that that's the best strategy, the strategy they're using. Because what will happen is they'll work to get all kinds of people out of institutions, but they won't necessarily be creating better options. What they'll be on is some deadline to shut down some institution or institutional unit. And that they'll do that. They'll get people out of institutions, but they won't necessarily get them into good options. And so I think it's short-sighted to say, well, we'll get to the rest of the families after we get everybody out of institutions. I think that's telling all families that don't have a family member in an institution, you got to wait. And I don't think that's fair. I think what would be fair is to say we're going to get everybody out of institutions, And we're going to proceed with families in the community to, get better options for them at the same time. There's no reason to say no to both, or, yes to one and no to others. Because otherwise, some of you are ready to rock and roll now. So why should we be telling you, wait 5 years or 10 years? Because believe me, at the pace governments move, 10 years, it may take 10 years to get rid of everybody's institution. And then you can come to the party. I'd rather you come to the party now, and we do both things at the same time.
Good point, Michael. I see another question from Rosemary Smith.
Good evening, Michael. When we had our family, my husband and I sat down and discussed the fact that our older children would not be emotionally necessarily the keeper of our children who have disabilities. And that has worked out really well in the fact that they will take care of their financials. They're there for support if they need it. Now, today I had a wonderful meeting with Autism Nova Scotia. One of my daughters had decided she wanted to live in an apartment. She is a young lady with autism. She's 32. She went out and took pictures of apartments where she wanted to live. Then the people from Autism Nova Scotia came in this afternoon. They started making lists with her. Now, she's asked for a 2-bedroom apartment because she does want a roommate. And then she said, well, why can't my sister come with me for a while? And when she finds a place that she prefers better, and I get my service dog, this will work out. And they're very, very open to that. So one child is going to be the owner of the apartment. The other is going to be in the apartment until she finds out if she wants to stay there or if she wants to move on. So it's, for us, thank God, it's finally starting to work. So we're really pleased with that. So I find that both programs, it's just who you ask the question to that you get the answer, whether they can go on with it. So we're very pleased with it.
Well, Rosemary, the very fact that you have kind of cited that example will probably resonate with some other families that are facing a similar kind of question. And so that's why it's important to hear about these kinds of examples and to have educational opportunities for families to hear what other families have done and why they did what they did.
Another little addendum to that is each of the girls are going to have their own separate community coach. So they don't have to be doing the same things at the same times because they don't have the same interests. Thank you.
No, that's a good example. And so just if I could suggest that, if we had a regular sessions with families where they're hearing what other families are doing, sure enough, they're going to steal good ideas. So be prepared to be thieved from, Rosemary, because it sounds like you're on the right track there of trying to find something for your family member.
I see another hand up from Susan Jorgensen. Can you unmute, please, Susan?
There. Yeah, are we there? Hi. Are you hearing
Hello.
me?
Go ahead.
Hello? Not yet? Oh, dear.
Go ahead, Susan.
Are you hearing me?
Please go ahead.
Okay. Yes. Well, my situation is, and something that I believe presently is illegal. My daughter is full care, and we're both, I'm getting elderly, and but for a start, I was hoping to get a bigger place for both of us to live, because I can't afford two homes. And so, but as far as I understand, I wouldn't be able to get where she's full support. I'd only get a limited amount of support, and I would like the opportunity to step back from her care. And what I'm not sure is, her only option is to have a separate unit. Have you heard me? And yeah, so I would like to start off with that. And my plan for a bigger home was that we would have somewhat of separate space, but it's not two separate units. And I would like to just step back from her care. She is 24/7 care. And we both enjoy each other. She really only functions as a much, 2 or 3 year old. So she has no desire to go out on her own. And, so option 2, in my mind, maybe and she has no siblings. So I need somebody to take over. So another option, and probably a more realistic option, is to maybe have something outside with roommates, but there would have to be a support system set up for her. I'm thinking something similar. Someone would have to be paid to oversee, and me as her family would support that, and that would set her up for the future. So it's just a couple of ideas that I don't know are realistic.
I think, Susan, that what you're proposing is quite realistic.
Yes.
It is a bit of a headache, though, figuring it all out.
Yes.
But you're on the right track. I think you won't be satisfied until it's done properly.
Yes.
But you're on the right track, and your idea basically could work.
Yeah, both ideas. Maybe, the bigger space that I hope both of us can move to, either maybe she would stay there, and that would be similar to a small options with roommates and with somebody being paid to take care of her, but her only supports would be like for me for a time, and and then hopefully some blood relatives could take over. Yeah, and then maybe I would move out. Maybe I'd be more, once I'm more aged, I may go into, the old age home. So, or we could stay together, and her supports would be part of my supports.
Well,
Susan, I'm just going to comment, because I think your juices are flowing, and I think that's what the remedy is all about, for us
Right.
all to start thinking outside of the box. And I
Yes.
know there might be a couple of other comments if we can move
Yep.
forward.
Oh, for sure.
We are to finish around 7:30, so if we can have someone else who might be interested, please go ahead.
I was just wondering how we get government to move, like we have these ideas. As parents, we think outside the box, but how do we get government to listen to us? How do we use the remedy to get them to listen to us and, work on two ideas at once? Like rather than get them to work on deinstitutionalization, sorry, my words are wrong, and supported funding, like self-funding. Like, as you're saying, they're going to work on one first and then they're going to go to the other. How do we convince government that they can do two things at once?
Well, my comment is that it's not illegal for governments to do two things at once. They're not violating the law to do that. In fact, governments are expected to be useful. And so asking the government to do something they're not doing at the moment is perfectly fine. Because not all good ideas are going to come from the government. And I think that the people closest to the person with the disability ought to be trusted more than any government. And I'm not anti-government when I say that. I just think that families have an investment in the person with a disability that is unparalleled compared with the investment governments have in people with disabilities. So families ought to be able to have a lot of say on what their family member ends up getting. So there's different ways to set up these projects so that families still stay in the driver's seat, but have an influence, a very significant influence. And as most families know, you're worried about what happens to my family member when I'm no longer here, which is a normal question for all parents. Well, one of the things is to plan as if that's coming soon. In other words, have something in place or as close to in place as you can, if you can. In other words, don't wait till it's too late. If you can, whether the government cooperates or not, start thinking about what would be optimal for your son or daughter now, rather than wait until you're unwell or something like that.
I think that's happening, but you have situations where families have created their own living arrangements for their son or daughter without government support. So it's coming out of their own pocket. And it's like, how do you change? And their ideas are good, but yet government seems to doesn't want to support them or is unwilling to buy into the fact that, oh my gosh, these parents have come up with a good idea, let's support them. So and I don't know if that's just the nature of Nova Scotia politics or what, but I find that very frustrating that when parents do come up with ideas and they implement them, they can't, like, government doesn't want to support them because it wasn't their idea, it wasn't government's idea.
Well, I wouldn't be too troubled by that because governments rarely get it right themselves, so they don't really, shouldn't have the final say. I tend to trust the families because they have a different kind of investment in the person with a disability. And what I would rather see is families coming up with their own proposals and then bargaining with government.
Mm-hmm. Because right now it's only families that can financially afford that who are successful with that. So,
well, that's true, but there is a lot of money being wasted in Nova Scotia on services that aren't really benefiting the individual, and there should be alternatives to those, and that creates then the funds that would be able to support people in something that's more person-centered.
thank you.
Thank you. Could we have one more and then we're going to wrap up? One more question. Michelle, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I do. Thank you. So hopefully 2 quick questions. You said that you thought the government was sincere this time around. I know you've worked with the government for over 20 years. Is that different than what you felt before?
Yes, I think I've been involved with governments in Nova Scotia going back 50 years. And this would be probably the best atmosphere with the government that we've had. And it's not ideal, but it's certainly better than anything I'd seen in Nova Scotia before.
Okay, and the other one was, I was wondering what you're thinking about this 5-year timeline. Seems like a lot of work to do.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Do you think it's
and
realistic?
I think it's 5 good years would make an enormous difference, because you can get a lot done in 5 years.
Yeah.
you won't be done in 5 years, but you can get a lot done in 5 years.
Okay, thank you.
I think Ann's trying to.
Yeah, I don't know what button to press here to ask with my hand up. My problem, my son lives at home, he's 47, he has autism, nonverbal. And I'm really, the past 5 to 7 years, I've really been having a difficult job getting respite workers full-time and part-time. And Autism Nova Scotia has been no earthly good to me in the past 3 to 4 years. I'm going out on my own and advertising. I'm getting a lot of responses from foreign people who unfortunately aren't suitable for my son because their communication skills are different. Their way of thinking is not the same. They have a low voice. Brian's not going to process the low voice, and they don't manage him and control him. And I hate that word, but they don't manage him and keep him restricted within the areas that he needs to be. So I'm at my wit's end. He's had 6 people since January. That's including the part-time guy coming in 3 times.
Wow.
And I'm now looking again for the 4th full-time person to come in. So I don't know what to do, where to go. I've tried to get the money increased that we receive. That's been difficult. I'm not even getting feedback from Dell Legal Aid to appeal it because Community Services already said no. And yes, I know I'm getting the most money in the province from Community Services, but it's time. Like, I haven't had a raise in the salary since 2018. So, that's 6 years ago. So I think I've got to come up with the cost of living. So I just don't know. I don't know where to go from here.
Well, I think we're all grateful, I'm sure, Anne, for the pioneering work that you've done. I think it's proof that what you've created is still better than what you had. And this will be true for all families, even when they've done their best. And they will have accomplished many things. They will also find themselves unhappy with some aspects of what they've got. That's not a sign of failure. That's a sign of being further along the path.
Yeah, I don't feel, that we're losing, but I just don't think we're gaining either at the present time.
Well, I think this is the time to take a chance on trying some new things, because the remedy is a good policy framework. It's helpful. It puts parents more in the driver's seat, parents and siblings both. It isn't, the really good things for people with disabilities aren't going to be something that is money creates. It's something that comes from good ideas that fit who the person is. And you can't beat families on that score. They'll know it if it's good for their family member. But even then, families are quite open to having their minds changed. So it's not that there isn't something around the corner you hadn't thought of. So what I call that process is the process of imagining better. And believe me, if you imagine better, you're closer to better. But if when you stop imagining better, you're close to what you used to do.
Yeah, I just don't know where to go to get respite workers anymore. I guess I'm limited where I can go. And
no, that's a very real problem and will be for years to come. They just don't have that organized very well. But I'll tell you who does have it organized. Their community organizations do better than governments. In other words, projects that are based in the community tap into resources that are different from than government funds.
So Michael, can I ask you for any final words, please?
Yeah, I think this is the time, they always say strike while the iron's hot. And it's, you never confuse the government of Nova Scotia as being hot. It's not really in their nature, but they're hotter than they used to be. And you wouldn't want to waste all that good heat. So I think it's a very good time to try some things. And I think the government is reasonably sincere. It's important to move quickly, though, because, you know, governments come and go, and the next government may not sponsor the remedy in the same way. So it would be good to, at least in the short term, to take some more chances and move ahead with some things, even though you don't have 100% of what you want, because you'll be in a different place if you take a few more steps.
Thank you so much, Michael. I mean, and as we can see, there's so much just there are questions, there's so much anxiety. We need to come together. And so what I heard from Michael say tonight, the importance of keeping an open mind, that we as a community, as a community of parents, families, we need to learn and educate ourselves. So Inclusion Nova Scotia is certainly hoping that this is going to be the first of many workshops, bringing families together, sharing other models that is happening elsewhere, excellent examples that have had great success. We know that it's important that we learn what we want, what would be a good fit for our sons and daughters. And it is up to us to present our ideas to government, not wait for government to come to us with their ideas, because I'm not sure that they know. We have to advocate not only for our own sons and daughters, but for our community to grow strong now and for the future. I really liked what Michael said when he said that our people should be seen as unique. I love that. The importance of person-centered or person-directed planning. And we have to find a life that fits our kids. Love that. And the importance of innovation and inspiration. And we all have to do a better job to imagine better. So I'm really hoping that we will have the opportunity to meet in person in the future. Please get involved, stay connected, get on our mail list so you're receiving information and receiving our newsletters, join our Facebook group. Please join our board, committee members, volunteer to help. All of the information is there. Again, we had a tremendous response tonight, and we know that families are anxious and have a lot of questions. And I really look forward, as a mom, as a parent who's been involved for a number of years myself, to really getting to know folks, to help us, to support us as a community so that we can grow and get stronger. So I think I'm going to end it there, unless Jillian or Sunny need to do any summary. And if not, Michael, I look forward to seeing you again and having you involved. Those of you who did not get questions answered, we will certainly go through the questions in the chat box and do our best to answer those questions. We look forward to seeing everyone, hopefully in the future. Please connect with Inclusion Nova Scotia staff if you have additional questions and want to get involved. And I'm really happy with our turnout tonight. Again, it's been a long time coming. So thank you again for those who attended. Hopefully we'll see you next time. We've got a lot of things to solve in Nova Scotia, and we can't do it by being separated and working by ourselves as families. It's about coming together and start demanding what we need for our families. So thank you. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Inclusion Nova Scotia. Onward and upward. Bye, everybody.